Hi guys. So today, this week, I've asked you all to read another short story by A.S. Byatt called The Thing in the Forest. This is a change from what I originally intended for the class. I originally intended us to read Flannery O'Connor's A Good Man is Hard to Find, but the other two stories that we read for this unit are a little heavy, and this one is heavy but in kind of a whimsical kind of way, so I wanted to switch it up and um, give you guys something a little bit different because it's so rich for literary analysis. Plus, um, I tend to teach the same stories, whether it's in my short story class or for the summer English classes, and this is a story that is new to me, and I'm sure it's new to you, so it kind of keeps it fun and interesting and exciting for me. So without any further ado, I want to do a little bit of a close reading of The Thing in the Forest. And our story begins with the phrase, "There were once two little girls who saw or believed they saw a thing in the forest." So we get this sense that it begins with children. And this story has been said to be a kind of modern fairy tale. And when we think of fairy tales, there are certain commonalities or elements that fairy and folk tales have. And one of those, or a few of those, are this idea of fantasy or supernatural elements and places, dualities of the good versus evil. And I don't know if we get like the good evil thing so prevalent, but we do certainly have those dualities in our main characters, Penny and Primrose. We have magical elements, and I mean, think about who reads fairy tales. Children, right? We're all familiar with the common fairy tales that were told through Disney and the Grimm brothers and everything like that. So we know that children are the people who read fairy tales. For what purpose, though? What is the purpose of a fairy tale? Well, if you look at the purpose of fairy tales, the common purpose, according to most scholars, is that it communicates knowledge and experience in a social context. It's a way to kind of teach children the difference between right and wrong and things like that. But it also, according to Jack Zipes, that the function of fairy tales is to, quote, awaken our regard for the condition of life and to evoke profound feelings of awe and respect for life, which can be altered and changed to compensate for the lack of power, wealth, and pleasure that people experience. So, in some ways, fairy tales are innocent ways that we can teach children about the things that about life experiences, and those life experiences are put in a context that's, I don't want to say non-threatening, but it's certainly in terms that they'll understand and accept. um but it also, I think that when you think about it, these stories teach children that life changes in a matter of moments for a variety of different reasons, like lack of power. And certainly, these children who are taken from their homes and to this strange, unfamiliar place, they certainly have a lack of agency or a lack of power. So, I don't want to get hung up here on too much of these ideas, but our story begins with there were once two little girls who saw or believed they saw a thing in the forest. So essentially, it's once upon a time. And we know based on these, we're dealing with children, and children are shaped by the stories that they're told or that they read. For instance, we get all of these allusions to other stories like Hansel and Gretel, Alice with a Y, Alice in Wonderland by C.S. Lewis. But we also get Penny's experiences and or interpretation of the mansion in the country is very much shaped by these Victorian novels that she's read, like Jane Eyre and David Copperfield. But um, we're supposed to have, based on this one opening line, it tells us as readers that we will have to have this willing sense of disbelief. It's a literary term. Is this story true? And even if it's the most fantastical thing that we've ever heard, we can still suspend our disbelief and accept it for what it is. And it kind of gives us that idea that we're supposed to question what we're told. Is this thing real? Did they really see something? Is this the overactive imagination of children? So our story begins with this group of children being sent away from home because of the bomb raids in London during World War II. I'm going to come back to that when we talk about our literary elements, but they're essentially being sent away because the city, London, is too dangerous for them. They have to be protected, they have to be shielded. And essentially, they're orphans, right? Penny and Primrose talk about being orphans, but if they stick together, they won't be. And they talk about the families that they could go to next. But being an orphan or orphan children or child without a father, child without a mother, i.e. Cinderella or Snow White, is a common archetype in fairy tales. But Penny and Primrose, I'll talk about their names later, I promise, are similar yet dissimilar. And we find out that one is lean, one with, pale skin and dark hair, one is plump and blonde. But I think these first couple of paragraphs really capture the mindset of these two young children who are on this train being sent somewhere outside of home. They're being cast out. And they don't know if they're being sent away on holiday. This is going to be something fun, or if it's a sense of, or if it's punishment. And I mean, as they're traveling, they see that the road signs are blacked out, etc. And all of this is because of, like, all of these things are happening because there's a war going on. But they don't understand that because they're children. And they're naive to these grown up ideas that all of these bad things that happen, like war. All they know is that they're scared. No one takes they don't know where they're being sent. And no one takes the time to explain this to them. For example, here in the text, it says, so the mothers of Penny and Primrose, who did not resemble each other at all, behaved alike and explained nothing. It was easier. Their daughters, they knew, were little girls who would not be able to understand or imagine. So no one takes the time to explain, hey, you're leaving your home because it's dangerous here. We want to protect you. But essentially, they're sending them to this unknown, scary place where they may or may not be protected with the people who are taking care of them. But for the sake of this idea that no one understands, no one explains to them this grand scheme of this concept to them. So in the grand scheme of things, their lives, right, are never going to be the same after this. This is the last time that their families are intact because, both of their fathers die in the war, and their mothers and their lives change drastically just by being sent away to this place, never mind what happens to them in the forest. So in our opening pages, there are some significant details that we get. So we get this emphasis on certainly truth versus certainty, this sense of childhood innocence and naivety. And we also get this pairing of two girls, they're the same yet opposite, who decide that one day they're going to visit the forest near the mansion, which is not unexpected. They're curious. I mean, kids are curious. They want to explore. And they certainly want to explore things that they've never seen because they come from London. They come from the city. The country is something that's new to them. The forest, as I think Penny says, I've never been to the forest before. And we get the description of the forest is like it's blocked off by this fence, so it's not something, it's kind of forbidden in a sense. And I'm going to talk about the importance of the forest symbolically a little bit later, but the forest is this kind of unforbidden, unknown, untrekked place. I mean, we get this description that there's no paths and they have to make a path of their own. But the interesting thing that happens in this part of our story is that this little girl Alice appears out of nowhere. And I think that this is interesting because she's not mentioned before they go into the forest, and she's not mentioned after they come back without her. So I want to take a minute to look at this little girl, Alice, who, like I said in the beginning, is kind of akin or an allusion to Alice in Wonderland. And what happens to Alice in Alice in Wonderland? She falls asleep and she has this dream, and her curiosity takes her to this bizarre, unknown world where she experiences things of the imagination that are magical, that it's impossible to, I mean, obviously it's a dream, it's not true, but they're things of a child's imagination. And Alice, if we look at her description, and I'm on page 327, there was a very small child, one of the smallest, whose name she told everyone was Alice with a Y. She told those who could spell. She was barely out of nappies, the British word for diapers, and she was quite extraordinarily pretty, pink and white, with large pale blue eyes and sparse little golden curls all over her head and neck, through which her pink skin could be seen. Nobody seemed to be in charge of her, no elder brother or sister. She had not quite managed to wash the tear stains from her dimpled cheeks. So this is the description that we have of Alice. And what I take from this is that she's young and she's tear stained. She's fresh. She's pink. She's innocent. I mean, she is the embodiment of innocence. And this is, I think it's interesting that they say that nobody seemed to be in charge of her. Like, all of these children are forgotten in a sense. They're not, I mean, think about it in the time of war. How do you explain that to a child? And in some cases, they're taken away from what's been familiar, what's comfortable, what would provide them in some form of fashion protection, and they're thrust into something that is potentially dangerous